Hello and welcome to another episode of Tech Wingman Tech Update, the podcast where we break down complex tech topics into easy to understand concepts for business owners, IT managers and professionals. I'm Vince, your host and tech advisor. Today, we're talking about why laptops and other devices are becoming so expensive right now. Let's get into it. Over the last few months, we've seen the cost of memory rise at a pace we've not really experienced before. Memory or RAM, once one of the cheapest components inside a device, has more than doubled in price since late 2025, and in some cases, manufacturers are being quoted prices up to 5 times higher than they were just a couple of months earlier. These aren't small fluctuations. These are seismic changes that ripple all the way from component manufacturers to business buyers trying to refresh fleets of devices. A huge part of this is being driven by AI. Data centers powering AI workloads need staggering amounts of memory, especially high bandwidth memory, and that demand has exploded. Manufacturers simply cannot produce enough to satisfy both the hyperscale AI data center market and the global device market at the same time. Experts have said it's unmistakable that supply won't meet the levels companies like Amazon and Google are planning for. And when demand so massively outweighs supply, suppliers push prices up aggressively. Some are even pausing price quotes entirely because they're confident the next quote will need to be higher. But this wave of price increases isn't happening in a vacuum. Around 5 years ago, during the rush to support working from home in the COVID period, organisations bought huge quantities of laptops and devices. Many of those are now reaching end of life, or they're falling out of support windows. Even without today's market pressures, we were due a massive refresh cycle in 2026. What's happened instead is that this natural upgrade wave has collided with soaring component costs, creating even more demand in a market already under strain. Storage is now feeling the same pressure. Devices that used to be comfortably affordable are suddenly £200 more expensive than they were only recently, even at the budget end of the scale. It's no longer just premium laptops and high-end workstations being affected. Even entry-level devices are seeing big jumps in cost because both memory and storage have increased at the same time. On top of rising prices, we're also seeing shortages. Some manufacturers have higher inventory and are experiencing milder increases, maybe 1.5 to 2 times the cost, but others with less stock are raising prices by up to 5 times. This inconsistency creates real problems for IT teams trying to predict cost and availability, and it's forcing suppliers to change how they sell. A practice that used to be rare is now becoming normal. You no longer pay the price at the time you place the order, you pay the price on the day the device actually ships. That makes budgeting extremely difficult because you're planning against numbers that may already be outdated by the time delivery happens. There's also a wider industry shift happening because Windows 10's extended paid support for enterprises ends this year. Any organisation still running Windows 10, and there are lots of them, will need to upgrade devices or replace them entirely. And because Windows 11 has stricter hardware requirements, particularly around memory and security modules, many perfectly functional older devices can't be upgraded. That pushes even more demand back into an already overheated market. Even the refurbished market, which many businesses rely on to keep costs manageable, is being affected. As new hardware becomes more expensive and harder to secure, more organisations are turning to refurbished devices, driving those prices up as well. Refurb was traditionally the relief valve for budget-conscious buyers, but even that buffer is tightening. In the middle of all this, there's a growing trend of organisations looking at ways to extend the life of their existing hardware instead of replacing it immediately. One of the options getting more attention is switching older machines to Linux. Unlike Windows 11, Linux doesn't require modern processors or large amounts of RAM just to run smoothly, and it can breathe new life into devices that would otherwise be considered too old for a Windows-based refresh. It doesn't solve every business need, but for some teams, it's a practical way to delay replacement until the market stabilises. And while earlier estimates suggested that adding 16 gigabytes of RAM might increase manufacturing costs by around £30, the reality is that those figures have already been overtaken by the latest increases. Manufacturers are seeing far higher impacts now, and those costs are being passed directly to customers because margins just aren't deep enough to absorb them. Smartphones are also facing rising build costs, adding further pressure on both IT budgets and consumers. All of this leaves businesses with some tough decisions: pay more for the performance they need, compromise on specs, and accept slower devices, or try to stretch out the life of older hardware for another cycle. None of these options are ideal, but they reflect a supply chain facing extraordinary pressure and a market still adjusting to the sheer scale of AI-driven demand. If your devices need an upgrade now or in the next year, we recommend you start your planning as soon as possible and not leave it until the last minute. If a device fails, then there may not be a similar device to replace it.
Claire's blatant plug.
Need extra IT resources without hiring full-time? Projects piling up? Deadlines looming? Introducing dedicated tech from Pinpoint Networks. Your flexible, short-term resource solution. Get short-term or part-time experts when you need them most, from service desk engineers to network specialists. Our vetted professionals slot straight into your team, backed by our full support network and knowledge base, so you stay on track without the overheads. Find out more by emailing hello@pinpoint-networks.net.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Tech Wingman Tech Update. If you found this helpful, be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends and colleagues. Until next time, take care.